My sister left me bleeding on the floor at her dress fitting, so I destroyed her $24,000 wedding with one click. Stick with me, because what she did next made me question everything about family. Before we dive into it, tell me in the comments where you're from. I love seeing the different places people tune in from. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this. It started on what was supposed to be a sweet sister bonding day. Mara, my older sister, invited me to her bridal fitting. A surprise, considering we'd barely spoken without tension in years. Still, I went. I wanted to believe maybe things had changed, that maybe she finally saw me as more than her awkward, quiet shadow. The boutique smelled of lavender and money, racks of silk and lace glimmering under soft lights. Mara stood in front of the mirror, glowing, surrounded by her bridesmaids, all perfect, polished, and whispering about destination honeymoons. When she saw me, she smiled that sharp, rehearsed smile. "Clara, you actually made it." The girls giggled, and I laughed it off, trying not to shrink. I helped her zip up the dress, delicate white fabric that looked like it cost more than my rent. My hands were shaking, nervous, and when the zipper caught, I tugged too fast. The edge of the fabric cut my finger. I gasped as blood dripped onto the floor, and onto her hem. The room froze. Mara turned toward me, eyes wide, not with concern but rage. "Are you kidding me?" she screamed. "You ruined it." She pushed my hand away, the motion sending me backward. My heel slipped on the polished floor, and I hit the ground hard. The sting in my hand didn't compare to the humiliation burning in my chest. Her friends rushed to her, not me. One muttered, "How clumsy." The seamstress ran to blot the stain while Mara stood over me like I was something she'd stepped in. "Just go," she hissed. "You've done enough." I left, bleeding, dizzy, my heart pounding in my ears. No one followed me. That was the moment something inside me cracked, not just from pain, but realization. Family wasn't supposed to make you feel small. That day, covered in my own blood, I promised myself one thing. She would never make me feel powerless again. Growing up, Mara was the kind of daughter parents bragged about. Straight A's, homecoming queen, endless charm. Everything she touched turned to gold, or at least that's what everyone said. I was the quiet one in her shadow, the one who stayed behind after family gatherings to wash dishes while she soaked up praise for breathing. If Mara cried, the world stopped. If I cried, Mom sighed and told me to toughen up. Our house revolved around her. Every photo on the walls was of Mara smiling in some achievement. Her trophies lined the shelves. Her name was always the headline. When I brought home a good grade, Dad would say, "Maybe you'll catch up to your sister someday." I learned to stop trying. It was easier to fade into the background than to keep losing a game I never agreed to play. As kids, Mara used to tell me I was lucky to have her. She said it half-jokingly, but there was always truth behind her words. I was her shadow, following, cleaning up her messes, making excuses when she forgot birthdays or lied to our parents. I kept her secrets, like the time she crashed Dad's car and convinced them I had borrowed it. I took the blame because that's what I'd been trained to do. Keeping peace in our house always meant protecting Mara's image. By the time we were adults, that dynamic had hardened into something I didn't even question anymore. She led, I followed. She shined, I dimmed. Even at family dinners, when conversation turned to her wedding, my parents would light up, their eyes sparkling like she'd just given them a grandchild already. When I tried to talk about my job or my life, the room shifted, like my voice didn't carry the same weight. That's why the invitation to her dress fitting had felt like a miracle. A sliver of hope that maybe she wanted me there not as a prop, but as a sister. I see now that it was never about inclusion. It was about control. Her wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was another stage, another performance where I was cast in my lifelong role. The quiet, unimportant extra. Only this time, I was done playing the part. The boutique looked like something out of a dream. Chandeliers dripping light over velvet couches and dresses that shimmered like clouds. But from the moment I walked in, I felt out of place. Mara's bridesmaids sat in a row, sipping champagne and laughing about bachelorette plans. Their eyes skimmed over me like I was a stranger who didn't belong there. One of them whispered something, and they all giggled. I caught a word, single. My face burned, but I forced a smile. Mara stood on a pedestal in her gown, twirling like a movie star. The fabric hugged her perfectly, and she looked every bit the woman our parents worshipped. "Clara," she said sweetly, "can you zip me up? You've always been good with small things." The words were sugar-coated venom, but I stepped forward anyway. My hands shook as I tried to pull the zipper. It snagged halfway. She sighed loudly, rolling her eyes so everyone could see her irritation. Seriously? Even this is too hard for you. I tugged again, and that's when I felt the sharp sting, the zipper's edge slicing into my finger. I gasped as blood welled up, but before I could say anything, Mara twisted around too quickly. The sound of tearing silk filled the air. The back of her gown split slightly, and a crimson drop hit the hem. For a moment, no one moved. Then she exploded. "Are you kidding me, Clara?" Her voice cut through the room. "You can't do one simple thing without ruining it." She yanked the fabric away from my hands. I tried to apologize, but she wasn't listening. "You're so useless," she spat, her face twisted with disgust. "You always mess everything up." The seamstress rushed over, panicked, and one bridesmaid covered her mouth to hide a laugh. The room blurred around me. I tried to step back, but Mara shoved me away, her hand hitting my shoulder hard enough to send me stumbling. My heel caught on the rug, and I went down head first. Pain shot through my skull as I hit the floor. No one helped me up. Mara didn't even look down. She just said, "Get out." Her voice was ice. I stood dizzy, clutching my bleeding hand. As I walked out, the laughter followed me, echoing in my ears like a song I'd never forget. Days passed after the fitting, and the silence from Mara was louder than any apology could have been. I waited foolishly, thinking she'd call, that maybe she'd realize how badly she'd humiliated me. But she didn't. Instead, I heard through our parents that she was busy finalizing the wedding. When I visited for dinner a few nights later, the whole conversation revolved around her. Her menu, her flowers, her dress alterations. My mother gushed over every detail, while my father nodded with pride, completely ignoring the tension sitting beside them. When I tried to speak up, Mom brushed it off with a tight smile. "Mara didn't mean to upset you, honey. She's just under pressure." It wasn't the first time I'd heard that excuse. Mara had a lifetime of being excused, from cruel words, broken promises, even from kindness. I bit my tongue and stared at the table, realizing they would never take my side. Later that night, I walked past the living room and froze when I heard my mother's voice drifting from the kitchen. "I think it's better if Clara doesn't come to the wedding," she whispered. "It'll just upset Mara. You know how sensitive she is." My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. My father didn't argue. He just sighed and said, "Maybe you're right." That was it. That was all it took for them to erase me from their perfect family portrait. I went to my room and closed the door quietly. I didn't cry, not then. I just sat there, staring at the glow from my sister's open laptop on the desk. I'd been house-sitting while she and her fiancé were out of town, making sure her precious cat was fed. Her world, as always, trusted me to take care of it. On the screen was her wedding planner file, open, detailed, meticulous. Every vendor, payment, and schedule listed in neat columns. I scrolled without thinking, reading notes she'd made, including one that said, "Don't tell Clara anything important." That was the moment something in me shifted. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I just felt still, like my heart had finally gone quiet. She'd taken everything from me, dignity, love, even my place in my own family. But she had left me the keys to her perfect little kingdom. And that night, I realized I knew exactly what to do with them. I opened the planner file like someone cracking a safe. Not because I wanted secrets, but because I needed to know how fragile that perfect day really was. The spreadsheet was clinical. Deposits listed next to vendor names, line items for seating charts and tasting menus, a lump sum for the hall that read like a small mortgage. The number next to the venue made my stomach drop. It was ridiculous, a line on a page that felt obscene when you thought of everything else it could have paid for. Each vendor had payment dates, contact info, and tiny notes in Mara's handwriting. Confirm. Hold until April 2nd. Non-refundable? The more I read, the more I saw seams in the whole thing. Not because she'd been careless, but because she'd been meticulous in a way that left predictable patterns. She liked things perfect because she liked things controlled. Her passwords were the same kind of neatness, a pattern reused across accounts because it made her life simpler. It was the kind of habit a domineering person makes to keep everyone and everything in line. That habit, more than anything, felt like my way in. I didn't know how to break into people's lives with force. I knew how to use what they'd already given me. I cataloged every little clue, which vendors accepted cards, which required checks, who handled refunds, what names were listed for billing. I made notes not because I wanted to hurt, but because I wanted to be surgical. I thought about timing more than mechanics. The damage would be loudest when it would hurt the most, when guests were already en route and the florist, the caterer, and the photographer were due to arrive. There's a sort of cruel poetry in timing. A carefully placed interruption can turn a day of celebration into a slow-motion collapse. I mapped the sequence in my head, imagining the crescendo of confusion and the quiet, private relief that would wash over me after the chaos. I rehearsed keeping a steady face while the world around me faltered. I didn't indulge in fantasies of public shaming. This wasn't about spectacle for me. It was about rebalancing something that had always been off. I made contingency notes, what I would say if confronted, how to remain distant without seeming suspicious, and how to disappear once the first wave hit. I told myself this wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was a response shaped by years of being invisible until it suited them to notice me. When I finally closed the laptop, I felt oddly calm. The plan wasn't a single act so much as a composed strategy. Take advantage of what was already exposed, strike when the stage was set, and walk away without fanfare. I slept poorly that night, but my mind was quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. For the first time, I felt like someone who could decide her own story, even if the choice was a hard one. A week before the wedding, Mara showed up at my apartment unannounced, as if nothing had ever happened. She breezed in wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a latte, looking every inch the woman whose world revolved around her reflection. I stood in the doorway, frozen between wanting to slam it shut and wanting to hear what she'd come to say. "I thought we should clear the air," she said casually, placing her drink on my table like she owned the place. For a split second, I thought maybe she had come to apologize. She didn't. Instead, she crossed her arms and said, "So, I've been thinking, you should still be part of the wedding." My chest loosened until she added, "As a guest usher." The words hung in the air, and she smiled like it was a gift. I asked what that even meant, and she shrugged. Handing out programs, showing people to their seats, keeping things organized. It's simple. You can handle simple, right? The sting hit instantly. I realized she wasn't trying to make peace. She was reminding me of my place. Her eyes scanned my small apartment, the second-hand furniture, the worn rug, and I saw the flicker of superiority in her expression. "I just don't want you feeling left out," she added, voice dripping with false sympathy. Then, almost as an afterthought, she laughed softly. "Try not to ruin this one, okay?" I felt something shift in that moment. Not rage, not sorrow, just clarity. Every small humiliation, every time I'd been made to shrink, every moment I'd been told to be grateful for scraps of kindness, they all converged into one silent, steady thought. This would be the last time. I nodded, pretending to agree, letting her believe I was willing to play along. She talked about her rehearsal dinner, her honeymoon plans, all while sipping from her cup, oblivious to the storm she'd just set in motion. I listened, quiet and composed, the picture of compliance. But inside, the decision was already made. When she left, her perfume lingered in the air, sweet, artificial, suffocating. I sat on the couch after the door closed, staring at the folder I'd hidden away, the one that held all her carefully arranged perfection. She had no idea she'd just handed me the permission I needed. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was balance. The night before the wedding, the house hummed with excitement. Laughter spilled from the kitchen, glasses clinked, and the air smelled of perfume and catered food. I sat quietly in the corner, a spectator in a celebration I was never really part of. My parents fluttered around Mara, praising her for every minor detail, their voices soft and full of pride. It was strange how familiar it all felt, me on the sidelines, invisible, while she shone like the sun. I smiled when they looked my way, nodding at their small talk, pretending to share their joy. Inside, I was counting hours. When the guests finally left and the noise faded, the house fell into a heavy silence. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creak of footsteps above me. Mara's laughter drifted down the hall as she talked to her fiancé on the phone, giggling about the perfect day ahead. Her voice sounded rehearsed, too bright to be real. When her door finally closed, I waited another half hour before slipping out of bed. The hallway was dim, lit only by the glow of the decorative nightlights Mom insisted on keeping. I moved quietly, every creak in the floor sounding like a shout in the stillness. Mara's door was ajar. Inside, her gown hung on the closet door, layers of white fabric cascading like a frozen waterfall. I stepped closer, drawn to it against my will. It was stunning, flawless, untouched, fragile. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. Then my eyes drifted to the desk. The family laptop sat open, the faint light of the screen illuminating the room. The same familiar file name blinked in the corner. Wedding master folder. My pulse steadied, not quickened. I moved like I'd done this 100 times. I plugged in the small drive I'd brought, the one holding everything I'd prepared, confirmations, vendor lists, backup details, and the commands that would unravel it all. Midnight struck, the digital clock changing numbers with a soft click. My reflection stared back at me in the screen, calm, expressionless. I typed her passwords from memory, one after another, until I was inside. A few keystrokes, a few carefully placed cancellations, a few irreversible changes. When I was done, I closed the laptop gently, the way you might shut a coffin. I looked one last time at the gown, the centerpiece of her perfect world. Then I turned off the light, walked back to my room, and slipped under the covers as the house slept on, unaware that everything would collapse with the sunrise. The morning started with sunlight cutting through the blinds, warm and bright, but the air felt heavy. I could hear the house stirring, my mother shouting directions, the faint buzz of hairdryers, the chaos of final touches before perfection. Mara's laughter echoed down the hall, loud and self-satisfied, the sound of someone who believed nothing could touch her. I stayed out of the way, sipping coffee at the kitchen counter, calm in a sea of panic I knew was coming. It began small. A phone buzzed on the counter, Mara's, flashing with a florist's number. She answered cheerfully, and within seconds her voice changed. "What do you mean canceled?" she demanded. Her tone sharpened, rising into panic. She hung up and immediately dialed another number. Moments later, another argument. Then another. The rhythm built like a storm breaking open. The caterer regretted the last-minute change and confirmed the non-refundable deposit. The photographer said the booking had been voided by her own email address. Her face drained of color, disbelief settling in like frost. By the time the venue manager called, the house was chaos. Mara paced the kitchen in her robe, mascara smudged, shouting that there must be a mistake. The venue calmly explained that payment had been reversed, the hall released, and that several staff members had already been reassigned. She tried to log into her email, typing furiously, only to find her account locked from too many failed attempts. The silence after that was sharp enough to cut through glass. Our parents hovered helplessly, trying to calm her down, offering useless suggestions. Maybe a backup location, maybe just postpone. But she was unraveling fast, sobbing, accusing everyone of plotting against her. "Someone did this on purpose," she screamed, slamming her phone on the counter. No one knew what to say. Guests were already arriving at the empty hall, calling confused. Each ring on her phone was another nail in the coffin of her perfect day. I stood by the window, watching the street outside as the noise swelled behind me. Every scream, every frantic breath, every broken word felt like a release. Not joy, not triumph, but balance. She had built her life on control, and now it was gone with a few invisible strokes. When the house finally went quiet, I picked up my bag, slipped out the back door, and walked away without looking back. The morning sun hit my face, and for the first time in years, I felt weightless. The fallout came fast and loud. By the next morning, word had spread like wildfire through our small town. The wedding that never happened. Neighbors whispered about the technical disaster, some claiming the vendors had double-booked, others insisting it was a sign the marriage was doomed from the start. The story twisted with each retelling, but the truth stayed buried where it belonged. I watched it unfold from a distance, detached, as if it were happening to strangers. Our parents refused to believe anything other than coincidence. "It was bad luck," Mom said over the phone, her voice trembling between pity and denial. "Everything that could go wrong just did." She sounded more embarrassed than heartbroken. Dad blamed the companies, saying people didn't know how to do their jobs anymore. They both avoided the word failure, especially when it came to Mara. She'd always been the family's perfect investment, and no one likes admitting their prized possession cracked under pressure. Mara stopped leaving the house for days. The once carefully curated version of her life crumbled. Calls went unanswered, friends backed away, and the man she'd been so proud to show off vanished after one final argument. I heard through our mother that he'd called it off, said he couldn't handle the drama. The engagement ring went back into its box, and the dress, the same one she'd guarded like treasure, stayed locked in the closet, untouched and cursed by her own perfection. I didn't reach out. There were moments I thought about it, when the silence stretched long at night, when I imagined her sitting alone in that too big house. But every time the urge crept in, I remembered the blood on that white hem, the way she'd looked at me like I was beneath her, and how easily she'd let me be erased. Peace doesn't always look kind. Sometimes it's just the absence of noise. One night, my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. I didn't need to hear her voice to know what she'd say. She'd cry, tell me she needed her sister, ask me to help fix what she broke. My thumb hovered over the call, heart steady. Then I turned the phone face down, let it ring until it stopped, and sat in the quiet that followed. Not happy, not vengeful, just finally free. Months later, everything felt quieter. The whispers about the ruined wedding faded, replaced by new gossip, new scandals. But the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was freedom. I moved out of my parents' house and into a small apartment of my own. For the first time, the space around me felt honest. No fake smiles, no forced apologies. Just peace. Therapy helped me face what I'd buried for years. The exhaustion of chasing love that was never offered freely. I didn't talk about revenge. I talked about release. Every memory of Mara was a reminder of how easily I let myself become the background to her story. But not anymore. I started building a life that didn't orbit around her approval and every small victory. Every morning I woke up without that weight on my chest, felt like reclaiming a part of myself. My parents still try to pretend nothing happened. They call, asking if I've spoken to Mara, telling me she's been through a lot. I listen quietly because there's nothing left to say. What I did wasn't born from hate. It came from years of being unseen, from realizing that sometimes justice doesn't come wrapped in forgiveness. Mara's engagement ended. Her fiancé left, and she vanished from social media. People stopped talking about her, but I know that day still haunts her. Maybe she wonders who was behind it. Maybe she blames the universe. Either way, she's never looked in my direction. I see her name sometimes, on wedding forums, on old family posts, and it doesn't sting anymore. She was the golden one once, the untouchable star of every story. But even gold tarnishes when it's built on lies. I don't hate her. I don't wish her harm. I just don't wish her anything at all. She took my trust, my peace, my sense of worth, and I took back my power with one quiet decision. If she ever stumbles across this and reads these words, she'll finally understand. She'll remember the fitting, the scream, the blood, the humiliation, and she'll know the truth she's tried so hard to ignore. If she ever reads this, now she knows why her wedding never happened. Do you think I did the right thing by ending it that way, or should I have tried to forgive them? Tell me what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine. Do you think I did the right thing by ending it that way, or should I have tried to forgive them? Tell me what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.